Democrats unveiled their agenda for the 2018 and 2020 campaigns today.
When you lose elections, as we did in 2014 and 2016, you don't flinch. You don't blink. You look in the mirror and ask,
how can we rebrand? From American Public Media, this is Marketplace. In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Ryssdal. 24th of July, Monday. Good as always to have you here, everybody.
Okay.
Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, and a handful of Democrats from both chambers of Congress took a little field trip today.
We are back.
Into Trump country.
So, good afternoon, Berryville.
Berryville, Virginia, the county seat of Clark County, which went, by the way, 57-37 for the president last fall. The Democrats were there to explain how they are going to stop that from happening again.
American families deserve a better deal. So this country works for everyone again, not just the elites, not just the special interests. Today, Democrats start presenting that better deal to the American people.
That's the new slogan, a better deal.
My thoughts are that they're not a fast food organization. They should have come up with a better slogan.
Robert Paskoff runs Brand Keys. That's a brand equity consulting firm.
I know that they've been wrestling over this for years about who they are and what they should stand for. And I don't think it's the kind of thing that you take a weekend and come up with a slogan and expect that that's going to do it for you.
Here's why Paskoff said that today. If you listen to Schumer today, what he was saying sounded a whole lot like what the Democratic Party has been saying for a good long while now.
First, we're going to increase people's pay. Second, we're going to reduce their everyday expenses. And third, we're going to provide workers the tools they need for the 21st century economy.
Schumer and Nancy Pelosi said today they're going to be rolling out the rest of the party's new economic agenda over the next couple of weeks. We'll bring it to you when we get it, folks. Actual economy-wise, this news, the International Monetary Fund weighed in with an update of its growth forecast this morning. In April, the IMF was figuring the U.S. economy would grow at a rate of 2.5% next year. That is now down to 2.1%. That bangs smack up against the hopes and dreams of the Trump administration, which is counting hard on an economy that grows at 3% a year to make its budget and legislative proposals make sense. Marketplace's Sabrina Benishore explains what's going on.
The IMF downgraded its forecast because it's been looking at the same news headlines out of D.C. that the rest of us have.
Given the dysfunctionality in terms of the relationship between the executive branch and Congress, I believe the IMF reduced their expectations.
Campbell Harvey is professor of finance at Duke University. Expectations of what exactly? Well, like a lot of people, the IMF thought we were going to get tax reform and infrastructure spending sometime in the next year or two.
Infrastructure spending impacts GDP growth immediately when it's spent, but it also is very efficient in that it impacts GDP for many years in the future.
But if the political chaos around health care reform is any indication, we shouldn't hold our breath for infrastructure and tax reform, and the IMF sure is not. That does not mean, however, that the U.S. economy is circling the drain.
The economic fundamentals are still intact.
Peter Donisanu is investment strategy analyst at Wells Fargo Investment Institute.
We've seen unemployment down at multi-year lows. We've seen consumer spending continue to increase. Business investment continues to increase. International trade is also on the rebound. U.S. exports are at multi-year highs.
And at 2.1%, the U.S. is still expected to grow faster than average for advanced economies. And all of that is good news. But as nice as that is, the U.S. could be growing faster. Economically speaking, it's just not living up to its potential. In New York, I'm Sabrina Benishore for Marketplace.
On Capitol Hill tomorrow, there's going to be a vote in the House on a Russia sanctions bill. It's the source of some tensions between Congress and the White House. Also in the European Union, where some EU industries are saying they would get squeezed by this thing, too. From Washington, Marketplace's Nancy Marshall-Genzer has that one.
The U.S. sanctions bill targets Russia's energy industry, even mentioning a Russian gas pipeline project by name. Siobhan Hall is with S&P Global Platts, an energy data and analysis group. She says the U.S. sanctions could delay that pipeline project because European energy investors would pull out to avoid the sanctions.
The pipeline is being financed in part by 5 European companies. So the Russian gas company Gazprom would have to look elsewhere for financing.
And that would take time. This is bad news for the EU because, according to Hall, it gets 30% of its natural gas from Russia. The EU also frets that some of its technology exports could be affected by the bill if they had military uses. Europe's financial services companies are nervous about what would happen to their U.S. operations if they ran afoul of the sanctions. Paul Maidment of Oxford Analytica says U.S. regulators would have lots of options.
They can freeze accounts, they can remove licenses.
But some Europeans hope the sanctions bill does become law and the U.S. takes a harder line on Russia. Simon Tilford is with the Center for European Reform.
Many feared that the lack of strong U.S. leadership on the issue would make it impossible for the Europeans to maintain their own tough line on Russia.
Tilford says the U.S. and Europe coordinated sanctions under previous U.S. presidents, but now the EU isn't quite sure what the U.S. will do. In Washington, I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer for Marketplace.
Also on the Hill tomorrow, by the way, a vote in the Senate on whether to start debating health care, in case you hadn't heard. Wall Street today, 2 down, 1 up. Small changes, though, as has been traders' want of late. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. The thing about that healthcare vote in the Senate tomorrow is that almost nobody, not even most senators, knows what version of the bill is going to be on the table because there are like 4 of them that are being talked about. What we do know is that as much as President Trump has said he wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, most recently today in an event at the White House, the administration is quietly moving ahead with one thing that is in all the bills: programs that aim to slow healthcare spending in Medicare and Medicaid. Turns out that as healthcare keeps chewing an ever greater slice of this economy, controlling costs is something that everybody agrees is a problem. From the Health Desk at WHYY, Marketplace's Dan Gorenstein reports.
Tucked into the 900-plus pages of the Affordable Care Act is a provision that created something called the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation. It's basically a health policy laboratory with a $10 billion budget, says University of Pennsylvania's Dr. Amal Navathe.
The Innovation Center was specifically charged with trying to develop new ways to pay for care that increase value. And when we think of value here, we're thinking better patient outcomes for lower costs.
Traditionally, Medicare pays doctors and hospitals for every service performed. In recent years, the center has rolled out several programs designed to pay for value rather than volume. One is the bundled payment program. The idea is for providers to keep spending below a fixed amount for a procedure like a hip or knee replacement. Any savings is shared between the provider and Medicare. Hospitals or doctors pick up the tab if they go over budget. Nearly 550 physician practices and hospitals have signed up, like here at Penn Medicine in Philadelphia.
What's her height?
5'5".
5'5".
Dr. Eric Hume and physician assistant Crystal Dow Fry huddle around a computer, reviewing the case of a patient who wants her hip replaced.
Sugar's coming under control?
I believe so, yes.
Good.
And just take a quick peek.
In the past, the team signed off on surgery quickly. Under bundled payments, providers want to make sure everything goes smoothly. If the patient has to be readmitted, for example, the hospital may lose money. Ironically, before the ACA, if a patient came back, the hospital would make money. So now, Hume and the team are more judicious, delaying surgery for months until the patient is in better health to minimize any complications.
We tell the patient that the risk of having a heart attack or having a stroke is related to how well their blood sugars are controlled.
Surgeons across the country have begun adopting this more cautious approach as the program is ramped up. Shifting how doctors do their jobs is a key goal. Get them to think about their patients more completely so they can root out wasteful care, says Penn's Navathe.
Each provider basically works in their own silo. I, as an office-based physician, for example, am going to see my patients and not think too much about the hospital. And the idea here is that if we start to actually think about what's happening across this continuum of care, then we can really unlock some efficiencies.
The limited evidence that exists on bundles show modest financial savings, about 4% per procedure. There's a lot of evidence about another of the center's programs, the more ambitious Accountable Care Organizations, or ACOs.
I've sort of been equating ACOs to a nice clean single or a well-laid bunt.
That's Harvard health policy professor Michael McWilliams. Under ACOs, doctors and hospitals are responsible for all of a patient's costs for the year, aiming to keep spending under a benchmark target. In 2014, they saved Medicare $700 million, or 0.5% of the program's spending. Tiny, yes, says McWilliams, but a beginning.
This has been sort of the holy grail in health policy, to try to establish incentives to both lower spending and improve quality, or at least lower spending without harming quality. And so far, this has been progress in the right direction.
Can ACOs achieve more than 0.5% savings? In a statement, federal health officials told Marketplace HHS is committed to finding and testing new models. McWilliams says the question is how much the Trump administration wants to roll up its sleeves to improve what the Obama administration started. I'm Dan Gorenstein for Marketplace.
Corporate story of the day comes to us courtesy of our capacity to believe that what's probably nothing might be something, and that something might be terrible. KKR, the private equity behemoth, is buying WebMD for $2.8 billion. Marketplace's Rima Crace explains what the deal's all about.
If you're like me, WebMD is that place you go when you have a weird ache and you're convinced it could be life-threatening. But oh no, it is much more than that, says Don Hooker, healthcare IT analyst at KeyBank.
It is not appreciated that WebMD has a professional advertising business.
2/3 of that advertising business comes from WebMD's site known as Medscape. This one is for physicians who want to keep up with the latest in their industry. Hooker says it's paid for by advertising from pharmaceutical companies.
And if you're an oncologist, they know where you are, where you specialize. You're volunteering all that information, and then they can target advertising to you.
Hooker says last year, WebMD saw a slowdown in that advertising, which is why it was looking for a buyer.
2016 was an unusually, surprisingly weak year for new drugs coming to market, new drug approvals from the FDA.
KKR will fold WebMD's sites into one of their portfolios that also houses sites like dentalplans.com and allaboutcounseling.com. Charles Rhee is a healthcare analyst at Cowen & Company. He says this deal could allow WebMD to offer its 70 million monthly users more, like, say, the option to schedule a doctor visit to fix that weird ache.
They probably looked at the market and thought about what they would need to do to be a consolidator, to bring those services to the market, and probably thought, doing it on their own was probably a bit of a heavy lift.
It's a smart move, he says, as consumerism, this idea of shopping around, seeps into the healthcare industry. I'm Rima Crace for Marketplace.
Coming up.
I say, well, if I'm telling stories, then I should just call myself a storyteller.
Detroit's chief storyteller on his hometown. But first, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's down 66 points today, 0.3%, closed at 21,513. NASDAQ up 23 points, 0.3%, 64.10. S&P 500 off 2, we'll call it a 0.1%, 24.69. The National Association of Realtors says existing home sales dropped 1.8% in June. As for home builders, lots of demand, rising costs as well. That includes a major source of lumber, that'd be trees that are burning in Western Canada. The Toll Brothers cut 0.2% today. Pulte Group up 0.4%. We talked about WebMD being sold to KKR. Sales price about $2.8 billion. WebMD shares up 19.7% on that. Bond price is down. Yield on the 10-year Treasury note, 2.25%. You're listening to Marketplace.
This Marketplace podcast is brought to you by Allstate. A lot of people don't realize that Allstate agents are more than just insurance agents. They're small business owners who have the entrepreneurial drive to own their own business. Another thing you might not know, unlike some other business ventures, you earn equity as an Allstate agency owner with the opportunity to pass it down or someday sell. There are no franchise or royalty fees, so the money you save on fees can go directly into growing the business the way you see fit. As far as earnings go, there's no salary cap. The sky's the limit. One thing Allstate agency owners enjoy, earning repeat revenue from policy renewals, something to help grow the business. Being an Allstate agency owner may be just the opportunity you've been looking for, especially when you have the backing of a nationally recognized brand like Allstate. Be more than just an agent. Be an Allstate agency owner and earn equity in the business you build. Check out allstateagent.com/marketplace after the show to learn more about owning an Allstate agency, subject to the terms of the agency agreements.
And by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? Do you know where to post your job to find the best candidates? Finding great talent can be tough. Thankfully, with ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100-plus job sites with just one click. Then their powerful technology efficiently matches the right people to your job better than anyone else. That's why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them. In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 24 hours. No juggling emails or calls to your office. You just screen, rate, and manage candidates all in one place with ZipRecruiter's easy-to-use dashboard. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified candidates with immediate results. And right now, our listeners can post jobs on ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/APM. That's ZipRecruiter.com/APM.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Ryssdal. In a little bit less than a month, August the 21st, for about 2 minutes, the moon is going to move in front of the sun, and in some places from Oregon down and across South Carolina, give us a total solar eclipse. Astronomers are saying some of the best viewing is going to be in central Oregon because of the high, clean desert air and typically clear skies there, which has farming and ranching communities in that region gearing up for a mini celestial boom. Oregon Public Broadcasting's Amanda Peacher has the story.
Rancher Grant Putnam strides through the knee-high grass on his 100-acre farm just outside the town of Madras.
So this is an orchard grass and fescue.
He and his partner, Christina Carpenter, own a cattle operation and farm called Organic Earthly Delights. Their cows and goats love this grass, says Carpenter.
These are our salad bars for our animals.
But come August, these fields will be covered with tents and cars and solar eclipse watchers. The farmers are putting on a 4-day festival.
We're going to have meals, the live music, we're going to have a dance floor set up, we're going to have the bouncy house, a water slide, we're going to have astronomers on the property.
Madras is expected to swell from 6,000 people to more than 70,000 for the eclipse. Motels booked up 2 years ago, so farmers started selling campsites in their fields. This is a big investment for these farmers. They need to pay for porta potties, permits, trash cans, insurance. They'll charge about $500 a head for 4 days of camping, meals, and activities. At first, some residents of this little farm town were nervous about this huge influx of outsiders.
And I keep saying, we didn't advertise it.
That's Lisa Vitimo. The eclipse is such a big deal here, the city hired her to be the eclipse coordinator.
Astronomers and scientists started talking about Madras 3 and 4 years ago.
Since so many people are talking about Madras, why not make the most of it?
Oh, yes. This is opportunity.
Overall, the city is spending about $100,000 on her salary and other preparations. The temporary economic boom is great, but city officials also worry about traffic jams, medical emergencies, and wildfires.
There's a lot of things that can go wrong when there's 70,000 people on the ground at one time.
Across Oregon, there are estimates of up to 1 million visitors coming for the eclipse.
It's definitely a once-in-a-lifetime thing for us.
That's Angie Ludi, who just opened up a clothing and gift boutique called The White Buffalo. She's stocking up on solar eclipse souvenirs.
T-shirts, paperweight rocks.
Don't forget the space-themed bath products.
They're actually called bath bombs, and for the solar eclipse, I'm actually going to be carrying the Galaxy Bomb, too, and it has a little alien in the middle.
Ludi was nervous about opening a new business, but the prospect of thousands of eclipse tourists coming into her shop gave her more confidence.
Starting a business now, I feel like it kind of gave me that extra push that I needed to go ahead and do it.
Back at Organic Earthly Delights Farm, Christina Carpenter and Grant Putnam moved their goat herd to a fresh pasture.
The animals will be here and kind of be a circus act. I hate to say that, but in a healthy sort of way.
Carpenter is even incorporating the goats into the farm's Eclipse Festival. Visitors will be able to watch how they react when the sun disappears. Sometimes this organic farm struggles to make ends meet. Putnam says they're hoping the Eclipse Festival will generate enough profit to double their income this year.
We want to expand into, pastured poultry and turkeys and chickens.
So far, they've booked about 275 campers, enough to break even. They know this is a rare economic opportunity. There won't be another total solar eclipse crossing Oregon until the year 2169. In Madras, Oregon, I'm Amanda Peacher for Marketplace.
"50 years ago yesterday, July the 23rd, 1967, the Detroit riots started. The economic story of that city since has been uneven and unevenly told. Hence Aaron Foley's new job as the chief storyteller of the city of Detroit. Aaron, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Kai.
Interesting job title. You picked it yourself, I understand.
I did. The original job title is going to be something along the line of director of content or executive something or another. And I said, well, if I'm telling stories, then I should just call myself a storyteller.
Yeah, of course. You are obviously from Detroit. Tell me, just to start people off with some idea of what you do, tell me the story of the neighborhood you grew up in.
I grew up in a neighborhood called Russell Woods, and it is on the west side of Detroit. I grew up in a brick house, a lot of brick homes in the neighborhood, and that's something Detroiters really like to talk about is the number of brick houses. We love brick. And a lot of community and family over there, lots of senior citizens. It was years ago, it was a mostly Jewish neighborhood, and then it became a mostly black neighborhood. I loved growing up there. I had kids in the neighborhood that I went to school with over there. I used to catch the Dexter bus everywhere. There was a corned beef place called Dexter Esquire that was there for years. They had some of the best corned beef in the city.
Oh, that's great. So the reason I asked you to tell me that story is because the story mostly you hear about Detroit nowadays, once you've gotten past the depopulation and the sort of the urban problems that it's been having, is the rejuvenation of the downtown core with the artists and everybody move in. You don't hear the stories of the neighborhoods.
You definitely don't. I mean, downtown and midtown only encompass about 7.2 square miles of the city, but our whole city as a whole is about 143. There's about, last census put us around 680,000 residents. That's 680,000 stories waiting to be told. Not all of them come from downtown. And I always say that Russell Woods, where I grew up, looks almost exactly the same as it did when I was a kid. A lot of places persevered in the last, decade or so after all this turmoil. And now is the time, I think, to start talking to people there.
I wonder if part of the story of the 50th anniversary of the riots is remembering what the riots were about.
It is. And one of the things I did not realize until I was older is that we didn't talk about it. And I went to Detroit Public Schools, and it wasn't taught to us. Wow. Maybe it was just the particular school tract I was in. I can't speak for all Detroit Public Schools, but I talked with several of my friends. I was like, well, how did you hear about the riot? When did you first hear about it? We heard about it at home, and hardly anybody really wanted to really go in depth and talk about it. But a lot of us did not really get this information, get the full story, until we were much older. And then we have the question, do we call it a riot? Do we call it a rebellion? One of the toughest parts for people my age is the memories are fading. This is 50 years ago now. For a lot of people, this will be new because it's one of those things that's so much a part of our history, but we didn't talk about it to the extent that we could have, in my opinion.
This is a tricky question, but where does race fit in telling the story, the economic story of Detroit?
Race doesn't just fit into the story, it shapes the entire narrative, right? Race is the cornerstone, the foundation of the way Detroit is the way it is now. And if you look at our demographics, The suburbs are mostly white, but the city core is mostly black. Now, I grew up in a black city, and I've seen, black mayors, black business owners, and things like that. But in the long run, seeing that we're still kind of suffering from some of the devastation that happened like years before I was born, how do we fix that?
Why does Detroit need a storyteller right now?
One of the bigger things that happened in the last couple of years is that we saw a lot of media coverage about the typically young, white, 20-something millennial moving to Detroit and saying sort of these offhand things about Detroit is a blank canvas, Detroit is a blank slate, and lots of attention is given to the budding entrepreneur who, quote unquote, takes a risk on Detroit. But again, you have mostly people of color, immigrant stories that are being ignored.
Aaron Foley, he is the chief storyteller of the city of Detroit. Aaron, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kai.
This final note on the way out, Dateline Redmond, Washington. Microsoft Paint is soon to be no more. There's an update coming to Windows 10 in the fall, and Paint is going to be allowed to wither and die. It'll still be there, just not going to be updated anymore. This will make you feel old, by the way. Paint goes back to Windows 1.0 in 1985. All right, quitting time. The Dow off 66 today, 0.3%, 21,513 on the blue chips. NASDAQ up 23, that's about 0.3%, 6410. S&P 500 down 2 points, we'll call it a 10%, 2469. Our daily production team includes Bridget Bodner, Robert Garova, Jenny Josephson, and Daisy Palacios. I'm Kai Ryssdal. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. This is APM.
This Marketplace podcast is brought to you by Allstate. Entrepreneurs, remember, there's more to being an Allstate agency owner than just selling insurance. It's a unique opportunity for you to build equity in the business with the opportunity to pass it down or someday sell. Be more than just an agent. Be an Allstate agency owner and earn equity in the business you build. Visit allstateagent.com/marketplace today.